Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's 3 Prakim Rambam. We are going to start with Hilchos Bikurim Im Sha'ar Matnas Kohuna Shebegvulen Perek Shneim Asar, which is the final chapter of Bikurim, and we're going to start Hilchos Shmita V'Yovel, chapters Aleph and Beis. So beginning with Hilchos Bikurim Im Sha'ar Matnas Kohuna Perek Shneim Asar, this chapter is all about the mitzvah of Peter Chamoir. This chapter has 24 halachas. Says the Rambam halacha aleph. Mitzvahs I say there's a positive commandment, live dois called Adam B'Yisrael, for any Jew to redeem Peter Chamoir, his first male issue of a donkey. In other words, if the donkey gave birth to a son first, that has to be redeemed with a sem. What does a sem mean? As we'll see, a sem normally means a lamb. In this context, a sem, like the word soin, means a lamb or a goat, as we'll see. If the person doesn't want to make that redemption, then there's another mitzvah. Mitzvah sasei la'arfai, it's a mitzvah to behead it, to decapitate it. As it says in Pashas Kisisa, upeter chamor tifta b'seh, and the Torah gives the option, plan B. If you're not going to redeem it, then ba'araftoi, decapitate it. Not related to the temple, not related to the Holy Land. And when it comes to these two mitzvahs, mitzvahs pediyah takes precedence, koidemes, lemitzvahs arifa, to the mitzvah of beheading. Halacha 2. Haseh shepoidim boy. Now that you make this redemption, which is ideally what you're supposed to do, that lamb, that seh, is given to a kohen. Shenemer, as it says, called peter. The rechem, really, the raya of the Rambam is from the continuation of the pasuk, where it says, "L'chol basar ash yakribu l'Hashem ba'adam of abehema yia l'cha." L'cha means it goes to the kohen. Halacha gimel. Then when it says ve'eis b'chor habehema atamei tifta, it doesn't mean any behema tameya. It means only the donkey. Behema tameya haburakan hi hachamoir bilvad. How do we know that? Because the Torah writes explicitly in Pashas Kisisa, upeter chamoir tifta b'seh. Halacha dal. Peter chamoir osir b'anachi yipada. Until you redeem this first issue of a donkey, you can't have even benefit from it. And if you sold it prior to redemption, you cannot benefit from the money that you received. The imeis koydem pidyon, if it died before you redeemed it, oisha arafai, or if you beheaded it, it remains asur b'hana. Hadei ze yekaver. Pnei shehu asur b'hana af la'acher arifasoi hoil v'loy nifta. Therefore, im loy pado, if the owner did not redeem it, the nasan peter hachamor ba'atzmi l'koyin, and he gave the donkey itself to a kohen, also l'koyin lishtamish boy, the kohen can't do anything with it until the kohen makes that redemption, and the kohen gets to keep the seh for himself, or the kohen will have the second mitzvah, which is ya'araf oisoi and v'yikaver. Now, the kohanim are chashudim al davazad. That means that we suspect them that kohanim think that if they got the donkey, they can already keep the donkey and they don't have to redeem it. And therefore, also the Yisraelitin petach amar lekoyin, elam kain, you see that the kohen will redeem it right in front of you. Halacha hifrish pidyon petach amar umeis. In other words, you, the owner, already took a seh. You made the exchange on the seh prior to giving the seh to the kohen, right? To meis hasekom the kohen. Then enachai ba'achri yusay. And the yitin hanavela la kohen, but you do have to give the carcass of the seh to a kohen for the kohen to benefit at least from the carcass. Meis peter achamoir achashepodo. That means the owner didn't get to keep the chamor died. Well, you still have to give them the seh. Yitin atalala kohen. Umuter b'hana yasa, you can have hana alochayde from the carcass of the chamoid because it was already redeemed. You meaning the owner. Halacha 6. When are you obligated to make this redemption? The yom sheyivalid, from the day it was born, ad va'at shloshim yom, until 30 days. Prior to that, do not decapitate. It's only from ma'achar shloshim yom that still you should redeem it. But then you have the plan B option, the imratzal arfai, the imratzal doisei paida, the enkan ela ikuf mitzvah bolvad. In other words, you're not violating on any isur, but you are not fulfilling the mitzvah in the right time. Halacha zay. If you will not redeem it for whatever reason, you want to do the option B, you want to decapitate it. So then, orfai bekupis ma'achoyrev, you decapitate it with a kupis. A kupis is a butcher's hatchet, and you do a dafka from the back of the head. Shenemer, as it says, ve'im leitiftai va'araftoi. But you don't kill the donkey, not with a staff, or not with a reed, or not with an axe, or not with the saw, ella bekupis with a hatchet. Don't put the animal into a room and lock the door. Kippah, that we will learn, like by the chatois, hamesois, there is such a thing at other times in halacha, not over here. Because the Torah says, and you shall decapitate. That's what you have to do. Halacha. Now, when you redeem it, it has to be dafka on a seh, meaning not on a calf, not on a chaya, not on a wild beast. Not on a seh that was already slaughtered. Not on an animal that's deathly ill. Not on a hybrid. Rambam, that's an animal that's a hybrid of a animal and a wild beast. Behem of a chaya. Shenemer, as it says, tifta b'seh. The ein karui seh ella. Here you have it. Kvasim or izim. Seh can also mean a goat, a lamb, or a goat that are alive, to the exclusion of everything else. Halacha 9, halacha 10, ein poidem b'seh hadoimin lamin acher. You may not redeem it on a seh that resembles another species. In other words, even though sometimes the father is a lamb, the mother is a lamb, the baby looks like something else. Lechatchila, don't use that. But v'im pada padi. Another din, upoidim ben pekua. Ben pekua means an animal that was carried as a fetus when its mother was slaughtered. That animal doesn't even need to undergo shechita if it survives, and you could use that for the redemption. However, ve'ein poidim b'psulei hamukdashim, an animal that was consecrated to go on the altar, then it got a mum. Now it was redeemed. It may not be long used. Why? Because it says bohen. The Torah equates the psulei hamukdashim after it's redeemed. Katzvi v'chayol, it's like a deer. And like an ayal, to tell you, matzvi ba'ayal ein poiden bahen, af hein ein poiden bahen. Halacha yud poiden b'seh. The seh that we are using, which again is a sheep or a goat that's alive, can be male, it may be female, bein timimin, bein balmumin, bein ktanim, bein gedoilim. Don't forget, it's not a carbon. Halacha yud alef. Seh shel hakacha b'dmei shvius. If you own the land, but you bought it with money that you got from produce of Shemitah, ein poiden bayes avadai. If you have a petach hamor that you know for sure is the first issue, because the kedusha of Shvi is chevra, it demands that it should be used only for eating and not for business. You're going to give to the kohen the seh, and you are receiving in return the chamor. That's an exchange. The chamor is something that you cannot eat. It's kabbalic. So if the seh is Shemitah, you can only use it for food. The chamor is not going to be used for food. So if it's avada, you can't do it. But yes, avol poiden boyes asafe. Just for example, we're going to have in this chapter, if a person has a mother donkey and she gave birth to twins, male, female, you don't know who came out first. There, the bottom line will be is that you will not give the lamb to a kohen. You'll make the redemption, but you won't give the lamb to the kohen. Since you're not giving it to the kohen, since you get to keep the lamb you get to eat. It doesn't matter if the lamb belongs to Shemitah, because you're going to be using it for eating. If you don't have a lamb, then you could redeem the donkey on the value of the donkey. And then you give the money to the kohen. But people say, why? The Torah says seh. Yeah, the Torah says seh lahachmad. The Torah doesn't say seh to make it only a seh. The Torah says you have an option of redeeming it on a seh for it to be easier for the owner. Meaning, if your donkey was worth 10 solay and your seh is only worth 1 dinar, guys, it's 4 dinars to a seller. In other words, it's only a fraction of the value. Then you could do that. Because if you're using a seh, the seh can be significantly cheaper. If you don't have a seh, then you have to give its value. That the rule is shenifta b'kesef. In other words, just like Hegdish can be redeemed on money, so the Chamor can also be redeemed on money, but it has to be on its value. Halacha Yudis. That you have this option either to redeem it for its value or to redeem it on a seh. That if you'll choose to redeem it for its value, the value will be at least 3 zuz. But if its value is very little, less than the 3 zuz, guys, every sela is comprised of 4 zuz, so it's 3/4 of a sela. Then you dafka have to use a seh, or if you don't have a seh, then you have to give more money, not its value, more than its value. And the Rambam says, and really the 3 zuzim has to do with the beinanis. Halacha Yud Gimel. I want you to know that every now and then that you have these ceremonies. I remember here in LA, it was a while back, but they publicized it, and someone made a pidyon petach. Halacha Yud Gimel hapoida peter chamor shel chaveroi. Without him asking you to do it, but the chamor belongs to your chaver. You don't get to keep the chamor. In other words, the pidyon doesn't help you acquire it. The pidyon of the donkey on the seh simply removes the isur. Now, whoever owns it can have hana. Halacha Yud Daled. Kohanim and Leviim are exempt from a petach hamor because the Torah juxtaposes shenemar in Parshas Koirach choir ha'adam the eitz b'choir ha'behemat me'atifta. From there we learned that kol sheyeshnu b'choir adam, which is dafka the father of Yisrael, the mother of Yisraelis. Yeshnu b'choir behemat me'yom. Apot b'choir adam b'choir adam pat b'choir behemat me'yom. Halacha tezvav alakeach ubar chamayde shel nachri. Listen to this: you purchased only the fetus. In other words, the guy owns a donkey, a mother, a female that's pregnant, and you bought only the fetus, or the opposite. You sold ubar chamayroy. You, the Yisrael, you own a chamayr, a female donkey that's pregnant, and you sold to the guy only the fetus, even though you should not have done that. Why should you not have done it? Because that sale will remove the mitzvah, but you did it. Then indeed the animal, the fetus, the chamoid, when it's born, need not be redeemed, need not be decapitated. And which is what we do at other times. Since you shouldn't have sold it, you should lose. No, here it's fine. In other words, if the nachri is a partner, either in the mother, or if the guy, if you have a goyish partner in the child, even if the value that he owns is very, very insignificant. What's important in halacha tezvav is that he doesn't own a limb. He owns a percent of it all, the most minute percent, that. But what happens if the guy owns a specific limb, either in the mother or in the child? Like he owns the hand, or he owns the leg, he owns the ear. Now it depends. You don't say always the animal will be exempt. If you would cut off that limb, the animal would have the status of a balmum, as we will learn in Hilchas Yisurim Mizbeach. Then indeed, but if the guy owns, if whatever the guy owns, if that would be cut off, if he owns a percent of it all, then always the animal is going to be exempt. This was a common practice in the times of Chazal, that someone owned animals, another person receives, in our case, the donkeys, and he is the one that's going to care for the donkeys, and the payment won't be money. The payment will be that the offsprings that will happen over time will be divided 50-50, if that was the deal. All of these cases, because it says, Peterechem, b'bnei Yisrael, ba'adam u'ba'behema, meaning, ad she'yah hakoil b'Yisrael. Halacha tezayin, ger shenes gayer, ve'ena yidua imachel in his gayer, yolda chamori oyacha shenes gayer. In other words, he converted in a mikvah. When he came back to his home, to his farm, his female donkey gave birth. He doesn't know when it happened. So there's a doubt. So the din is like this. First of all, whenever there's a suffix in Isur Torah, what's the din, guys? Suffix Isur, you got to be machmer. Suffix Mamoin, So therefore, you have to make either the redemption or the decapitation. And if you chose the ideal, which is pata b'sem, you'd make the redemption, but you keep. The ger keeps the lamb. Because of the rule, when it comes to money, Goy shehifresh petach hamoir. My dear Noisai, we notify him. You don't need to do that. She'ein chayev. And v'harei muter begizo uba avoida. Even though he designated it, he was getting ready for it. In other words, mitzvahs were given to Yidden. Halacha yutches. Para sheyolda kemin chamoir. A para that gave birth to an animal that resembles a chamoir, or a chamoir that gives birth to an animal that resembles a sus. Potter, they are exempt because it says upeter chamoir shnei pa'amim. From there, Chazal learned the mother, the and the offspring should be that type and should resemble that type. The din is, even though it looks a little bit like the mother is a donkey, guys. The baby looks ashtikel sus, ashtikel donkey. The din is chayev b'b'chayron. In other words, since the mother is a chamoir and the offspring has some identifying marks, you're chayev. Halacha yutas. Chamoir shelo bikra. If you have a chamoir, a female donkey that you know that it never yet gave birth, you're starting out with that. And now, when it gave birth, you didn't see which animal came out first, but it gave birth to twins and they're both male. Now, you don't know which one needs to be redeemed. Doesn't matter. You take one seh and you declare whichever one of my two baby donkeys are the firstborn, they are going to be redeemed on the seh. And whichever one it's coming from, this teleh is badai, property of the kohen. If you have a chamor that never gave birth before, but it gave birth now to a zachat and a nekeva, now what's the issue, Yakir? We have a suffix. We don't know. Maybe it gave birth to the nekeva first. So again, mitzad the isur, you have to be machmir. Mitzad the money, so mafresh teleh echad. And that is kedei lafkia kedusha mimenu. Achi yemuta bano, because Shem hazachan elo tchila. But this teleh that you designated, you get to keep. Ve'eno lokoyin. And the beauty is, guys, is that there's no isur connected to the seh. There's no kedusha connected to the seh. It's only are you chayiv to financial seh or not? In other words, we're going to go into various cases of sfeikos, and we're going to have all of the same rule. Stafik, isur, chumra, safik, mammon, you get to keep it. You own two donkeys. Neither of them gave birth. Now, v'yoldu shnei zachar. You don't know which chamor came from which one, but each one, vadai, each chamor is a peterech. You have to give two lambs, no doubt. If zachar unekeva, oy shnei zacharim unekeva. In all of these cases, now guys, if it's two zacharim and a nekeva, I just want to make it. I don't know what he's doing over the high show. We're getting pictures on the Zoom about the ceremony that happened over here. But the two zacharim and a nekeva, it could be that each chamoir gave birth to a zachar first. One only gave birth to a zachar. One gave birth to zachar. Could be. But you only give one. You only have to give one to let to the kohen.
No, Chamal Rabbi. One gave birth to a zachar and one gave birth.
We don't know that kid. We don't know what happened. In other words, you end up right now either with a zachar and a nekeva. Then for sure you only owe one teleh, or you see two zacharim and a nekeva. Even when you see two zacharim and a nekeva, what can be yakir? It could be that one animal gave birth to two zacharim, then only the first one is chayiv, right? The other animal gave birth to a nekeva. It could be that one animal gave birth to a zachar, and the other animal gave birth to a nekeva of a zachar. Then you also only chayiv one. But it could be zachar aleph and zachar nekeva beis. But that's a suffix. That's a suffix. L'choira, you have to be mafresh two teloim. L'choira, that I was just writing. You only give one to the kohen. Now, in all of these cases, there's only one suffix. Halacha Chaf Aleph is going to be brilliant. Halacha Chaf Aleph is going to point out that when do we say you have to make the redemption because of the suffix isur? If it's a suffix we're machmer. Suffix by a svek sveika, you don't even have to redeem it on a lamb. By a svek sveika, what will be a case of a svek sveika? Halacha Chaf Aleph. Yoldu shtei nekevos uzachar, which means you have two chamoiros. Neither of them ever gave birth before. You were not present when they issued forth. You were not there. Now you see two females and a zachar. Now judge each one separately. Could be this one gave birth to the nekeva. Only. It could be this one gave birth only to a nekeva and a zachar. Two possibilities. Both of these possibilities won't demand any redemption.
Mhm.
In other words, there are three options. Only one of the three is zachar and nekeva. Either only nekeva, this donkey, or nekeva and zachar, or zachar and nekeva. Or the same similar, you taka have shnei zacharim or shnei nekevas. Now every donkey, firstly, Yakir, could be this donkey gave birth to two nekevas. And even if the animal gave birth to a male and female, could be the female before the male. No, there's more than one option to exempt the animal. Ein kan l'koin klum, meaning ve'ein tzarach la'afresh l'la'atzmai. Because for each animal, that's called spek sveka. Shem ha'achas yod zachar, v'ashniya shtei nekevas. So the shniya is completely exempt. Oy shem yod zu nekeva v'acher zachar v'acher nekeva. Oy nekeva v'acher zachar. So it's each one. There's many options, and the roiv of the options will exempt it altogether. In which we will say that you won't even have to redeem it on a seh, because suffix isur l'chumra, when there's a normal suffix, meaning there's one suffix and not more than one suffix. Now achas bikra v'achlas lebikra, you have two chamoiros. Now we're starting a new scenario. One of them already gave birth. It means no matter what came out of the one, that bikra, you're not going to be chayv to do anything. The yoldu shnei zacharim v'nes arvu, you're zicher chayv. Then noisem telecha l'koyin. If what gave birth was zachar and nekeva, here there's one suffix. What's one suffix, Akir? Maybe the one shaloi bikra gave birth to the zachar. Mafresh le'ech la'atzmi v'noin l'koyin. Kneshu suffix. Hamitz mechaveri olavarayam. Allah chabeis v'chein alakeh chamer menagoy. You buy a donkey, you don't even know if any you do it in bikra and lebikra. You don't know if it gave birth before or not. And v'yolda zachar, so there's one suffix. Maybe it gave birth before. Maybe it didn't. So poida oisa b'seh, v'hula ba'olam epnei shu safei. Halacha chav gimel misha yolo yasek taloyim. And every single one of them, hefrisha yal safek petach hamoir. And we learned in the cases of sfekas, you get to keep it. Now you have 10 such 10 taloyim. Now the Rambam wants to make a point that there's another mitzvah giving meiser behema. Meiser behema is only by chulin. You don't say, I don't have to give meiser behema. If you get to keep it, because hamitzem chaveru olav araya, we're saying that it's mamish chulin. Haneihem chulin l'chol davar. And therefore, you're going to be chayv and giving a asrin kishar behema, umafresh echad min ha-meiser, and only the remaining are yours. You can't get it both ways. You can't say, "Oh, I'm not going to do meiser behema because maybe the lambs are not mine. Maybe they belong to the kohen. So then give it. If you're keeping it, then it's yours. If it's yours, it's chulin." Final halacha chav dalid, a Yisrael shoyeloi asara pitrei chamoirim vadoyin b'toich beisai. Now, what are they doing in your house, these donkeys? So listen to how you own them. You got it from your grandfather, maternal grandfather, who was a kohen. It wasn't born to your maternal kohen grandfather. Listen to what happened. It was born into the flock, into the earth of your maternal's Zayda's Zayda, who was a Yisrael. Now let's help up what happened over here. When they were born into the original owner, who's a Yisrael, what's the din? They were chayev b'pidyon. See, if they were born to the kohen, they're not even chayev in pidyon. They were chayev in pidyon. All of them. Prior to the pidyon, it went down and it belongs to the kohen. Once it belongs to the kohen right now has ownership in it. Ownership, Yakir, doesn't mean that he doesn't have to redeem it. He has to redeem it, but he owns them. Now you got it from your Zayda the Kohen. So you cannot be better than him. You have to be mafresh 10 cent You have to designate a seh because since it began by a yid, it was mechuyev in the pidyon, but you don't have to give the seh to the kohen. That's the chiddush. Since you got it from your zayda the kohen, so just like your zayda the kohen would have owned the 10 sayin, you also get to keep it. The hein shaloi, and now that you get to keep it, it's amazing. Now it's normal animals, and therefore you chayav on the meiser. How great is that? And here we say, Brich Rachmana D'Sayon. We thank Hashem, the merciful one, for helping us conclude Hilchas Bikurim B'Shar Maskona. We are now starting, my friends, Hilchas Shemitah B'Yovel, just to make a point that we are basically going into the final series of halachas in the 7th Sefer. The 7th Sefer that Yad HaChazak has 14. We are basically going towards the ending of the half of the entire Torah Shebaal Peh. So let's begin with the header. Hilchas Shemitah B'Yovel says that Rambam yesh b'chlol on shtayim ve'esrei mitzvahs. You have 22 mitzvahs. Teisha mitzvahs asay, 9 are positive commandments. U'shleish esrei mitzvahs loisaseh, and 13 negative commandments. And v'zehu pratan, and here let's go specify them. Number 1, Aleph, shetishbois ha'aretz mimelachta b'shvis, that the earth should rest from its work. Number 2, shelo yavad avodas ha'aretz b'shana zu, do not perform agricultural work, as we'll define soon. Really, it's not as much as people think. Midoiraisa. Number 3, shelo yavad avodas ha'ilam b'shana zu, you cannot work with trees. That's similar. Agricultural and trees, either or, both asur. Number 7, shelo yitzoir hasofiach keneged hakoitzim, do not harvest the produce that grows on its own. Sfiach means produce can grow on its own. You're not allowed to harvest it in an ordinary manner. Kederach hakoitzim, we will see that you could harvest produce of Shemitah a little bit and eat it, as we'll see. 5, similarly by trees, shelo yitzoir hanizidim kederach hakoitzim, do not harvest grapes in an ordinary manner. Number 6, sheyashmit mashatoitzi ha'aretz, give up ownership of all produce. Number 7, sheyashmit kol avosay, remove, renounce all debts. Number 8, shelo yigois v'lo yitva haloive, don't pressure a debtor, don't demand payment. That's not giving up, and in the negative, don't demand payment. Number 9, shelo yimanim alahavos kedem hashmita, don't refrain yourself from lending money before Shemitah. One would do that because the person is going to say, I don't want to lose my money. But you have to loan the money anyways. That's what Hashem wants. Number 10, lispoid hashanim sheva sheva, count the years, 7-7. And Yud Aleph, like Kadosh Nasa Chavishim, to sanctify the 50th year. Yud Beis, L'tkoya b'shofar b'asiri, to blow the shofar on the 10th day of Tishrei, which is what we call Yom Kippur, on the 50th year, in order for the Avadim to become all emancipated. Number 13, not to work the land on this year. Now we're going to have similar to Shemitah. Number Yudalit, do not harvest produce that grows on its own in a ordinary manner. That's key. Every word is key. Yud Tezvav, don't harvest grapes in an ordinary manner. Yud Tezayin, to provide redemption. What does it mean to provide redemption to the land? That will be the din of Stei Achuzah, ancestral fields, like we'll see that they go back to their owners. Stei Mikna, purchase fields. Yud Zayin, don't sell the land permanently, because sales of land is really only a lease in Eretz Yisrael. It's only up until Yovel. Yud Ches din batei oyer chayma. What happens if you sell a house in a walled city? Yud Tes shelo yinchal kol shevet levi Eretz Yisrael. They don't have any Yerusha. We give to them other matana lo shevas bahen. It's not a Yerusha, it's a matana. I have the merit to be a Chabad house rabbi. I don't care if you give me a Yerusha or a matana. It's all the same to me, right? I'll give you the same tax deductible, but it's not a Yerusha, but it's a matana. How amazing is that? So, for example, when we learned about Bikurim, we learned that they have to bring Bikurim, and they have to read, because they own the Ari Migrash. It's for certain dinim, they own it, they're mechuyev. For other dinim, no, they don't. They didn't yarshin it. Allah chaf shelo yikach shevet levi chelik b'abizim. When there's a war, there's spoils, they don't take apart. Chaf aleph litin laleviim adam lo sheva sumik d'shem, that we, the Yidden, have a mitzvah to give to them not only those cities, but with their open lands. Chaf beis shelo yemacher migrash oreim, that they may not sell. They can't sell it permanently. They can sell it, but they can always redeem it back. Elogoyelim lo oilam bein lifnei hayovel bein la'achar hayovel will be mitzvahs elo will be v'prakim elo. Today we are starting the first chapter. The first chapter is to clarify the isur of both working the land agriculturally and the prohibition of working with trees. And we'll see they're similar. And we're going to find out what is asan midoiraisa and what's not asan midoiraisa. Okay, this chapter has 22 halachas, halacha aleph. It's mamash fascinating. It's not what people think. Midoiraisa. Mitzvahs asay, there's a positive commandment. Lishbois b'shana shvi'is, to rest on the 7th year. May avoidas ha'aretz, from performing agricultural work. And another mitzvah, to rest from performing avoidas ha'ilanis. Let's call it the work that is normally done to trees. Shenema, as it says, and b'chlal, this is all in Parshas Bahar. That's the bulk of the dinim of Shemitah. Klaloisel, uprotel, v'digdukel, uv'shafsa ha'aretz Shabbos l'Hashem. And it says, b'chodesh u'bakotzir tishbois. If you remember, Machlekes Rabbi Kiva, Rabbi Shmuel, what that pasuk is referring to, that's in Parshas Mishpatim. I think Rashi noch brings both opinions. Rest with regard to plowing and harvesting. So that's already a big definition. Both is mabatal, a positive commandment, and is violating a negative commandment. Shenemar, as it says, back to Parshas Bahar, do not sow your field. Do not trim your vineyard.
So you still water them, right? You still water them and water them and spray them.
Watering will be permitted sometimes. Watering is asr midrabanan, and whenever you're going to lose everything, if you won't water it, you could water. Well, wait, mama, slowly. That's what I'm saying. That some people were taught it right. People that were taught it wrong, they have the wrong thing in their mind. That Rambam is going to tell us what the Eibush is saying. Halacha base. Now, eino loikim in atoyra. The malchus. Right, what did we, is only al zriya, guys, help up, on sowing or on trimming. That's called zamir. And listen, ba'alak tzira, and harvesting grain, tzira is harvesting grain, batzir is harvesting grapes. And by the way, harvesting grapes doesn't only mean grapes. Even though the word batzir is normally in reference to grapes, it's echad keren ve'echad shari lanos. So guys, this is very important. We learned 2 dinim. Only 2 dinim, which is Yahalskop Chevre, you cannot sow, and sowing will include trimming a tree, because when you trim a tree, not for the wood, when you trim a tree to make the tree grow more, that's an act of making things grow, nor can you harvest. Yakir, you're with me. That's it. It's amazing. Halacha Gimel. Now, Uzemira, trimming is really like sowing, because that's what it is. Sowing is clear. You have a seed, you want to make it into a tree. You're doing it for it to grow. Trimming was also done for it to grow. And ubetzira, we're speaking about harvesting fruit, is like harvesting grain. These 2 are similar. And therefore, since that's a fact, since zemira is really included in zriya, betzira is considered in ksira. So the Rambam says, "V'lama pratan hakasu." Why did the Torah have to specify it? Only Al-Shtei told us Eila Bavatu Shechayev. Aber Al-Shara told us other derivatives that are connected to working the land. Im Sha'ar Ha'ava Shaloin Isparshu Be'inyan Zeh is not something for which you're going to get Makas Midoiraisa. Ein Aloik Aleyan. I want to give you the best example. Even though the Torah that Rambam quoted Bechodesh, Charisha, if you will plow the land on Shabbos, Charisha is one of the Lamates Malachas. You're not going to get Malchus for Charisha, amazing, on the Shemitah year. Avol, Makanoise Makas Mardus. The Rambam is going to clear Halacha Dalet. Ketzah, for example, Charisha, if you plow on the Shemitah year, you're not allowed to do it. But I'm saying we're speaking about for what will you get Malchus? Or if you dig. Speaking about digging, that's L'Tzoyda Chakarka. Or Yahamizakal, if you're going to remove stones. We're going to have a lot about this in the next chapter. Or Yahamizabel, if you fertilize the land. In other words, you're doing stuff for the land. You're not resting from agricultural work. You're takanat, but you're not specifically sowing, planting, trimming. Or even more, if you're mavrich, if you extend the branch of the plant into the ground, or if you graft one branch into another tree, or if you plant a tree, you're not planting a seed. Look at this. You're not planting a seed. You're not trimming. You're doing something that you would think is very similar. You're taking a tree from here and you're planting it there. Imagine, even that. You're not going to be chayv malchus mid'oraisa. Wow. Halacha hey. Now, you may not plant on the Shemitah year, afilu ilan sarak, even a non-fruit bearing tree. Nor sometimes there is some sort of growth, like a wart that's coming out of a tree, and it's beneficial for the tree for you to cut it off. Don't do it. Don't do that. Do not remove leaves or branches that are dry. Don't do that. Don't apply dust to the top of a tree. That's something that is beneficial for many trees. Don't put smoke underneath it to kill all of the bugs. Don't apply on young saplings. They would apply a very bad smelling oil to keep away the birds when the trees are very soft. Don't do that under Shemitah. Don't apply oil to unripened fruit. It would make them ripen quicker. Don't make holes in them. Another technique to make them ripen quicker. Don't bind the plants, right? That they should stay together. Don't trim the tip. Do not prepare the supports for trees. But in all of the above, because by Hilchas Shabbos, people call this a tulda. Like it's a tulda from trimming. I know, not for Shemitah. The Torah repeated the Av and the tulda to tell you for this, you're not going to be chayiv malchus. Now ve'im asa achas me'elu b'shvis makenoisoi makas mardus. Wow, halacha above. Ein matzisen es or be'isha sakonim. You may not light a fire in an overgrowth of reeds, which would be the then simplest way to get rid of it. You burn it down. Why? Because that's called avodas karka. No, the Rambam is making it very clear. Any type of agricultural work is awesome, but you have to know for what will you get malchus, and for what are you only going to get a makas mardus. Halacha vayter. We're middle above. Sometimes young calves, if they're not taught how to plow when they're young, they'll never accept a yoke on them. But the problem is, if you can't do any agricultural work, so where are they going to train? So train them by the sand, because there's no benefit to the sand if it's a win-win. If you have seeds, if you want to test their viability, sometimes you would put seeds in a pot that has earth in it, and the way it would deteriorate would tell you how good are these seeds. You can't do that, but you could do it. Because no one does it that way. You know, if you're a farmer, you would have the same results. You would know what you're looking for, but you're putting it in zevel. You are allowed to soak seeds on the 7th year, right? Because what's asur? Let me use these words. Asur is avodas karka. Here you did nothing with karka. When you put a seed in afar in a pot to test it, you're doing something in earth. Here you're doing it in water. I don't care that these seeds are going to be ready. Another thing, umekaimin eswa alvai or haloi b'roishagag. If you have an aloe plant, so as we're going to learn, anything that prevents it from getting damaged is not called working the trees. That's preventing loss, and that's kavan. That's your watering that we'll see. Sometimes watering. So anything that you're doing to prevent it from getting damaged, by the aloe, it doesn't need water. But other things, that's okay. But avalein mashkenoisoi, because watering it is maintaining it. It's not maintaining, it's improving it. Improving is asur, maintaining is okay. That's the key.
What's aloe again?
Aloe tree, aloe. Many people use it for skin diseases. It's like a plant that many people kept at home.
Aloe vera.
Did it help you? Aloe vera didn't help me. Okay. Now you know aloe vera. Oh, now the red bands that people put around, whenever you see a person with a red band around their hand, side of them, b'shoigeg, violating the isur of don't go in the ways of the Amorim, it's darki Amorim. But in the times of Alpi Toiram, you put a red band around something if that thing is sick, and other people should daven for their getting better. Whenever you see a person with a red band, daven for them to get better because they're sick. They used to do it by trees. Whenever a tree is sick, so aside of us, you get a tree doctor, you want people to daven for the tree. So what did the owner do? He would paint a red ring around it, like this. When you walk by the tree, the tree is sick. So you are allowed to do it because that type of, it's just a siman. The davening is also okay. You can't improve it. Another din, sometimes trees are so filled with vitality that when they give fruit, it's filled with oil. It's an overkill. So if a tree is that bekoyach, they would put a lot of stones on it. It's amazing. So a lot of the koyach of the tree should go to hold the stones. So now the fruits will be good and not over good. It's like by young bachrim, the yeshiva overloads them because they're filled with energy. If you're not going to overload the person to learn from 7 in the morning until 12 at night, they're going to get into trouble. That's okay. That's mutter. Another thing, you are allowed to be oided. Oided means to hoe around the gefanim. And mekashkesh also means to hoe, but that's a lashon that's used when it's around zaysim. Why are you doing that? You're doing it to close the cracks. Anything that you're doing to close a crack is not called to improve. It's called to prevent damage. That's mutter. So im lahavra says ilan. But if the tree doesn't have any cracks, you're hoeing it to make it better. That's taka also. But the im lista mess up samim. If you're doing it to close the cracks, then it's mutter. Mamish mutter. Not makas mardus. Not only not the rabbanan. No issue. Halacha ches. Here we go. Mashkin is beis hashalchen b'shviz. A beis hashalchen is a grain field that's very thirsty. In other words, it needs a lot of water. And if you will not water it, all the trees, guys, you're not planting grain, but there are also trees in it. All the trees will die. Preventing something to die is something that's mutter. The chen stay alonis. Like this. You can't water the whole field, but you can bring water to every tree. But if they are planted in a way where we consider all of the land in service of the trees, again, and if the trees won't get water, the trees might die, then you can be mashkin all of the southern. Because it even though it does improve the land, but you're not doing it to improve the land, you're doing it to prevent the trees from dying. Well, Efer Alavan means that inside an orchard, people would leave a patch of open land that normally would be used to plant grain or to plant kitniyos. So the din is merapsim oisa b'mayim b'shviz. You are allowed to sprinkle even that. Afar halavan. Afar halavan is 50 by 50 yamas. Because if that area will become overly parched, then the rest of the orchard will also get ruined, meaning the trees will get ruined. Halacha 9. You are allowed to dig a pit at the root of a grapevine. You dug those pits for it to collect water. You can make an irrigation ditch. In other words, if you have water, why was that allowed? So first of all, we already learned you're not going to be chayv makas minatoida. You have to know the steps. Minatoida, you're chayv only for sowing, trimming, harvesting, and harvesting grain, harvesting fruits. Everything else is asan mid rabbanan, but the rabbanan were lenient. The rabbanan says she'im lo yashke, if you won't water such fields, the earth will become salty or it will become parched. And and the is only mid divreihem, as that's the yesod of this chapter. So therefore, like sowing by grain or by kitniyos, by vegetables, planting, or trimming trees, and the two taldos. I'm sorry, sowing is the av, and the trimming is the tolder. Harvesting grain, picking the fruit. Now, halacha yud aleph, mi sherabu. We got to get moving. Sherabu anasim. When the anasim means you have people that, mafia people that were lawless people. They started to take the law in their own hands. And veitinu malchi goyim al Yisrael lasas mosem l'chayil say. And once you live in a society that's lawless, it's a deterioration. It's a collapse. So one of the first things that they do is when things begin to collapse, they try to justify things. So you have these governors and they have soldiers and they force the citizens, you have to provide food for the soldiers. Now, imagine you're a Yid, you live in Eretz Yisrael, but the government is Goyish government and they're forcing you to give food to, you don't have food, you can't plant anything. So the din is, they allowed you even to seed. Now the problem is like this, guys. I just want to tell you. How can the Chachamim say that? You can't violate an Isur D'Oraisa. If the answer is Pikuach Nefesh, so then you don't need a halacha. That's you can be Machal Shabbos also. So many explain like this, that there's another thing that we'll be learning soon, that Bizman She'ein Hayovel Noye, the dinam of Shemitah is only midrabanan. Whenever, so that's the hemshah, just like we learned in Halacha Yud, that even when Shemitah is asur midoraisa, when it's in effect midoraisa, things that are asur midrabanan were sometimes allowed lechatchila, or the tree shouldn't die. When sowing is only asur midrabanan, the Chachamim allowed you to do it in these circumstances. Yeah, that's the next. The next step is that Stama the bandit, the next door neighbor, the mafia guy, told you got to work for me for free. Come on, and if not, I don't know what the guy will do to you. So from then on, again, let's go pshat. Whenever Shemitah is only midrabanan, then you can even sow. Halacha Yud Beis Anateya b'Shvis, when you plant crops, since you were not allowed to do it, you have to uproot it. Now, the truth is that you can argue, if you would have done it b'shoigeg, you should not have to uproot it. This is a knas. So why don't we say only b'mezid? B'mezid, uproot it. B'shoigeg, leave it. We're going to have similar halachas on Shabbos, right? If you cook food on Shabbos, it won't always be yasser ever. B'mezid, b'shoigeg, here we don't make that difference. Why? The Pnei Yisrael chashudam al hashvis. And if we'll be allowed to keep that which is planted b'shoigeg, so the guy that's amazing will say, shoigeg hoyisi. Halacha Yud Gimel Achodesh Esodeo. If you plow your field, not some sort of breaking of the ground, some sort of light plowing, or if you fertilize it b'shviz. And why are you doing it? Because you want it to be already bettered for the 8th year. So the din is koin senoisoi. Even though chodesh is not asur midoraisa, you give a knas. That what? That next year, the whole 8th year, you cannot use that field. Another thing, you can't even rent it out on the 8th year for someone else to plant it. No, ella tehei bura lefanov. That's a knas. However, you only penalize the violator. But if that person passed away and his son inherited that field, then yes, Yisrael benoi. If you are removing thorns from your property, in order to have it already cleared out for the next year, or if you remove stones, here it's not as bad as the previous halacha. You didn't plow. So now, afapi that you shouldn't have done it. Halacha tezvav. Before we had refrigeration, one of the ways that we would keep vegetables fresh, it's amazing, is that they would put it in the ground. Not in a way where it would take root, but it would partially keep it fresh. So the question is, can you do it? We're not allowed to sow. Here the issue sometimes can be marasayin. Can you put it in the ground? It looks like you're planting. So hatoim in lefis, if a person is burying or preserving, hiding a turnip or a tzenoinois or radishes, so if some of the leaves are protruding above the ground, so it's clear you're not seeding it, you're not planting it, Eino choishish, there's absolutely no problem. Ve'im lav, it's asur. Asur, guys, because of marasayin. Toimen es aluf. If you bury a wild onion, what we want to do is, guys, you want to pack it densely, because if you would be seeding it, you would spread it out. So this quantity makes it clear it's only for keeping it fresh. And you only put a tefach of afar on top of it. Imagine, you pack in 4 kav al goiva tefach with only a tefach. No one does it to seed it that way. And another thing, you bury it where people are stepping over it, because when people are stepping over something, it will not take root. Another thing, you are allowed to cut off. You are allowed to rip off protruding stalks of rice. Don't cut them off. In other words, there's a type of harvesting that is asur, and there's a type of harvesting which is not to harvest, but it's probably only to protect. It's probably to protect the remaining rice, and that's okay. Halacha tez zayin, but initially we said that a person should be allowed to gather wood, stones, grasses from his fields. He's gathering it, guys, not to clear the field that we learned as Zasar Midrabanan. He was gathering it because he needed fuel, or he needed the stones to build. But provided that he takes only the larger ones, because that makes it clear when you only take the larger ones, you're still leaving stuff on the field that you're not clearing your field. And it's clear that. That's from my field, I can take the larger ones. From my friend's field, I can take everything. But that really their intent was lenakos, and lenakos is asur. And they would cover up their sin by saying, "Oh, hagas on the then asur sheyitel adam klumisadeyu." From your own field, you can't even take gas. And even when you take stuff from your friend, you have to do it. You don't tell your friend, I'm doing a favor for you. In other words, do a favor for me. You can't say those words, because then it's keilu, each one is doing it for themselves. Okay, halacha yud zayin. You have your animal standing on your field. You can gather all types of grasses from your own field to give it to your animal to eat, because everyone sees you're not doing it to clear your field. They see what you're doing. If you have over there if you have a cooking range and you need to fuel, and you're gathering the grasses or the woods and you're putting it straight into the cooking range, from your own field, not only gas and dak, everything. You're cutting down a tree or two because you need to have fuel. You can even dig out the roots, even though you're going into the ground, because if it's only 1 or 2, right, it's still little. People understand you're not doing it to clear your field. If not, you will do a lot more. You're only doing it because you need the fuel. But if you are cutting down 3 or more and they're one near the other, then if you need the fuel, you can cut it down. We're not speaking about fruit trees. We're speaking about non-fruit trees. But lo yisharesh, but you can't dig out the roots. Sharem isaken ha'aretz. Elokoitzitz me'im ha'aretz. Umaniach shirashos, what you cut it all the way down to the ground. You don't go into the ground. That you have that restriction because it's mutech shaloi. That's why you may not be mishadish. You cannot uproot the stumps. You cannot take out the roots. As we just had above, mutal shadish. Halacha yutes amibakeya bazayis litol eitzim. If a person is chopping branches from an olive tree for the wood, again, lo yichapem. Do not cover the place where the branches grew with earth, which is something that people will do to better the tree, because that's called an avoid of the tree. It's going to get ruined, so there's something in between. Cover it with stones, cover it with straw. It doesn't allow it for it to get ruined, but it doesn't better the tree. Halacha chaf. Hamizanei bagafanim. One who's trimming the ends of the branches of vines. Now, this is not called trimming, so I don't understand. Trimming is also doiraisa, right? Trimming is the tulda of zoireya. But this type of Hamizanef means a tail. That's nothing. That's not awesome midorais. Or v'hakoitzitz kanim, or if you're cutting down reeds, hareza koitzitz kedarkoi. You can use a kardoim, a hatchet. You can use a magol, a sickle. You can use a megedo. Ubechol ma sheyirtze. Ubechol ma sheyirtze. Obviously, we're speaking about someone who needs that for fuel, but that's not called trimming, because mustama, that little amount doesn't do anything. Halacha chaf aleph and koitzin b'sula shikma. There's something unique about a sycamore, some sort of wild fig tree. There, you may not cut down the wood. B'sula shikma means it was never cut down before. Bashvis kederech shkoitzin b'shar hashanim. Why? Because that type of cutting down is always called avodah so'ilan. Shebektzitza zu tigdal v'toisif. And what happens if you need fuel and that's your only source? Then yes, koitzitz oitza, but it has to be shaloi kederech avodas. So when it comes to halacha chaf, when you're mezanev b'kefanim, you can do it kedarkoi. It doesn't better the tree when you take just the tip off. It's not zemira, it's much less. But when it comes to ketzitzas, psula shikma, it's asur kedarkoi. So what is shaloi kedarkoi? The final halacha chaf base, ketzad, koitzitzin me'im aretz. You cut down only the branches that are very close to the earth, or the branches that are above 10 tvachim. These do not benefit the tree. Everyone knows that. Everyone means now you know it. I know. We're learning the Torah. It's amazing. Another din. Ilan shenifshach. If a tree is split, here again, you want to mend it. Now, you are allowed to mend it on the Shemitah year, but your kavanah is not sheyaleh. You're not making the tree better. You don't want the split to grow. You don't want the split to be added. And that's the nekuda, that based on the fact that midoraisa, it's only us, the two of us and the two tolas. Everything else is us and midrabanan. But when it comes to you losing, it's going to get ruined, they allowed you to do it. So that's these details here. Like your kavanah will make all the difference, because if your kavanah is to make it, to heal it, it might get healed. Then you will not be allowed to do it for that purpose. But you're not doing it for that purpose. You just don't want the split to grow. Then you are allowed to mend it. Gavaldik. And now we're moving on to Perek Sheni of Hilcha Shemitah v'Yovel. This is really a hemshech to the first chapter. In other words, Charisha, just to get quick, we learned in the previous chapter, it's amazing, that plowing a field on Shemitah, plowing, makas mardus, but not makas minatoir. We learned that removing stones, fertilizing, not osen midoiraisa, makas mardus. But there's a big difference between these two, because plowing is mamish in the ground. You're working the ground. Removing stones, fertilizing, you're not working the ground. So as we will see, there'll be certain scenarios where we'll be more lenient in certain things. So we're going to further define what type of activities are halachically considered activities that are bettering the ground and they'll be asur midrabanan, and what activities will be completely mutter, because your kavanah, like we'll see in the Rambam over here. First example is fertilizing. I have a chutzner. My courtyard is filled with manure from my little kashkas. I want to put it somewhere. So you can't tell me don't put it in your field. No, I'm putting it in my field. Ooh, but it looks like you're fertilizing the field. See, but so then there'll be ways that I would be allowed to do it if it's clear that I'm not doing it to fertilize my field. Like I'm not spreading it out, I'm putting it in one pile. This chapter has 14 halachas. Let's start with halacha aleph. A person should not remove waste from his chatzir. Now, am I allowed to remove waste? Of course. But I can't put it in my field on Shemitah. Why? Marasayin. It looks like I'm doing it for it to be good already for the 8th year. But I'm not doing it for that. So there's a way for me to do it where there won't be marasayin. How? If I am creating a garbage heap, a garbage heap means it's a big heap. If you're being mezabel, you don't make a heap, you spread the joy everywhere. You understand? You're making an ashpa, then it's going to be mutter. Now let's define that. Call the timing. This is the time that people that are, God forbid, not keeping Shemitah are fertilizing the land, don't even make an ashpa then. When is that time? Listen to these words. For who? Meshe Yekosher Hamasik. Guys, you will learn from the Torah everything. When bitter apples become dried out and knotted, that's the time that it's too late to fertilize the field. People would fertilize it prior to that point. So first of all, wait until those bitter apples become dried out. Now you know why the Eibusha created bitter apples. Now, and then you can make it into an ashpa. An ashpa means you're making it into a heap. Let's define the heap. A heap cannot be less than 150 sa. Zevel. That's a lot of zevel. Oh, why? That it's an ashpa. Now, if you want to add to that, gesund hate. Now, what happens, Yakir? What happens, Keva? If I began making an ashba before Shemitah, I have no issue. So before Shemitah, I already put 100 saw. On Shemitah, in my chatzar, I only have 50 saw. That's good. In other words, if I already began making the ashba prior to Shemitah, that's the case over here. That's the answer. People get confused. Add the words before Shemitah. Now, moisev olav ha'oilech. As long as what I'm doing on the Shemitah is hitting the 150 or more, it's clear. It's not fertilizing. It's making a pile of dung. Also, in every Beisa, don't make more of 3. Because if you make many, many, many piles, you're fertilizing. Oh, halacha base. Now, up until that limit, you can do oiser. Another din. If you want to make it into only one pile, you can make it. Or you can make it into 3. You can make it into 1. As long as each one is in the amount of me'ah v'chamishim sa, you're good. And as long as you're not putting it on the field when everyone else who wouldn't be keeping Shemitah, or in the other years, they're being mezabel the field. If you're placing the dung on a rock, no one plants on a rock. You understand? Or if you make a hole in the ground 3 tfachim, the hedim hazevel. Or if you build a platform on the ground 3 tfachim and you put the zevel on it, here no one would fertilize over there. So you don't have to. So in other words, you resolve the marasayim. You can put less. In a side of a beisa, which we said before, you can only make 3. If you have the stone, you can make more. You're just collecting your waste. You're getting the waste away from your chutzner. If you have a corral, you have this, corralled off area, fenced off area, and it's filled with soin. Soin is sheep, soin is goats. Again, you want to get rid of that zevel. You can put it how? Following the conditions that we learned in halacha aleph, in an halacha beis, and an halacha gimel. You can clear your chatzir with those conditions. You can clear your corral, as long as there isn't even marasayim. You are allowed to make a dir b'terech b'shvius. If you're making a corral, which you are allowed to do, Beis Osayim is 100 by 50 amas, because then it looks like you're really trying to fertilize your ground. So you make that area or less. But we'll see, you can do that, and then you can do on its side. And you can do it one more time, you can flip it. Flipping it means you leave one wall, you move the other 3 walls, the nimsa, the most you can make mezabel terchsadeo based on baso in halacha hey hoisa kosadeo based on basoim. If that's the entirety of your field, then already doesn't look good, because then you're doing everything. So then you have to leave a little bit. That you didn't fertilize your field, but a shahat soin itiluba vinidairo. The lo yoimru zibol zeh kosadeo b'shvi. Halacha vav. Yes.
What doesn't it mention? You should create a separation between the sown and the land. Like nowadays, it would be plastic or something else.
First of all, you don't have to do it. They didn't have the option then. Or let me word it this way: we did learn in halacha gimel kevan, if someone were to put that, if you would put that plastic, then you can put as much fertilizer as you want. and a chanam. As long as it's clear, you're doing it because you want to get rid of your manure from another place. You're not doing it to put the fertilizer here. Halacha vav. Now we're going to clearing your field from stones. Another type of preparatory avodas haaretz that makanois and makas mardus, but sometimes it's going to be mutter depending on your intent. If you want to open up a quarry is you break through the ground in order to find a place that's stony, to remove stones, to have stones for building. Now, theoretically, that's mutter, because building you can build on Shemitah. Problem is, it looks like you are removing stones from your field. There's a marasign, you are clearing your field. So, lechatchila, to open up a quarry, you cannot do it. Shema yoinru l'sakan sedei on the that your real kavanah is to remove all of the stones. But if you began doing it before the 7th year, and what does beginning means? Look at these dinim. You already removed 27 blocks of stone. So what's the magical number? Chav Zayin, I don't know. And every stone already had the size of 3 by 3 alrum shalosh. Kol even mehem. Amal amabrum amal. In other words, it's 3 stones by 3 stones, which is 9 stones. 9 times 3 is 27. That's how we get to the 27. Areza Mutter knows you already did that. People see you have a quarry. People see that you have this big, you're gathering stones. So there's no more marasign. Once you have that, it's beautiful. Another thing, a stone wall that already is 10 tvachim high or more, and you want to remove its stones. You're removing the wall. If it's made out of 10 stones or more, and every single one is such a large stone that it can only be carried by 2 people, or even more than 2 people are needed. In other words, you see clearly those stones are chashuv. You're clearing it for the stone. Because you don't have any. The stone wall lechatchila was never 10 tvachim high, or it was 10 tvachim high, but it didn't even have 10 stones, or it had the first 2 conditions, but the stones are small. A stone means that some of them could be carried by 1 person. Then 1 second, we don't say you can't remove the wall. You can't remove the wall all the way to the ground. You can remove the stone wall, but you have to leave the final tefach above the ground stony. Now it's clear. You're not clearing your field. If I cared, you left. Clear. You only took it because you needed the stones. Because you need the stones. Allah says that you must leave a row of stones, a tefach, the closest to the ground. If your intent is taka, why are you removing the wall? Because you want to be misaka in your field. And you began doing it under Shemitah. If that's b'chlal not your kavan, you mamish don't want the improvement of your land. Or even if you want the improvement of the land, but you began doing it before Shemitah, then the din is noitel b'shvius kol mashir tzeh b'chol makom. The goy did on the audits, you can mamish clear the land. Beautiful. It's not, you see, plowing is worse. Even though only makas mardus, clearing from stones, we're more lenient. Even if you are a contractor, doesn't matter. Since it's not yours, go to Allah audits. Even if the stone wall is not so big. Allah 9, stones in the field that would be dislocated by a plow, or if they were mechusais. And now vinisgalu. If you have at least 2 stones, that each one can only be carried by 2 people, and you are allowed to remove it. No one is going to think that you're doing it to improve the ground. Again, these stones are chashiv, but if they're smaller, if you are removing stones from your field, again, because you need avanim. So how do you do it in a way where it's clear you're not clearing your field? Take off, the stones that are high up, take off. The moment you leave the stones that are touching the ground, it's clear. You're not doing it to clear a field. If you have a pile of pebbles, if you have a pile of avanim, here also. But if the pile is on top of a stone, in other words, there's a stone imbued in the ground, or there's straw on the ground, no one can plant there. Even if you were to remove all of the stones, you didn't clear the field. Then get to the school. Next series of halachas. Halach Yudalev. Lo yamala adam gai afar. If you have a groove in the ground, you cannot fill it with earth. You cannot fix it with earth because that's called improving the ground. Aval oisuhu chayitz al pi hagai. But you can make a divider. I don't want to fall into the groove. So a divider before the charitz is something that's allowed. Another thing, if I'm standing at the edge of this groove, and there's stones so shallow in there that I can just bend down and pick it up, then if I have to go in there to remove stones, then it looks like I'm improving the ground. Halacha Yud Beis, Avnei Kosev, stones that are carried on one's shoulders, meaning smaller stones. Before we were learning about stones that you have to have two people to carry. Now we're learning the opposite. One person can carry 2 or 3 stones. You can schlep them around. That's something that's allowed. Don't forget, you can build on the Shemitah here. That was building material. That's what they needed. Someone who's a contractor, maybe even Avalim is smaller. Even though the smaller the stone, the more it might look like you removed it to clear the field. Doesn't matter. You're carrying it on your shoulder, you're behaving like a construction worker. They love that. They put the hard cap on and they put a big 2x4 and they come and they ask you for money. And then they go and they drink beer and they show up a week later. That's the minute. Now, Pirza, if you have a pirza, that means you have a space in a wall, and we're going to begin. You have a wall that's separating your property from the public domain. That is a wall that is needed for your protection, for your privacy, for Ganavam not to break in. And there is a hole in the wall that is filled with earth. So if the way it was Mickey Mouse fixed, but you didn't fix it by putting new stones in, but it was fixed with afar, then you can't build it with stone. It looks like you're doing something to protect your property, to better your land. Because maybe the rest of the wall can fall down, it wasn't fixed properly. Or if you didn't fix it with earth prior, then you can build it. In other words, guys, let's remember, these are the words. I think this is the words. Tikkun sadeh is awesome. Midarabanan. Tikkun sadeh. Shmira sasadeh is muter. There we go. Halacha Yudala, the final halacha. If I want to separate my field from my neighbor's field, I want to build a wall, that's asur. Why? Because that's called tikkun sadeh. My neighbor is not going to steal from me. That's the type of neighbor that we're hoping for. In other words, there is no shmira.
But you're improving your land. You're improving your land.
That's exactly. Because if I'm open to the Reshus Harabim, this is not about improving land. This is about guarding my field. Another thing, when I am allowed to build, I can make the wall. You can't just put the wall on top of the ground. It's going to fall down. You have to go into the ground. How far into the ground? Only until the stone. And the offer that you removed in which to put the wall, you can gather in your field. How can you gather it? Not spread it out. Because if I'm spreading out the earth, I'm improving my field. How can you do it? The way we had in the beginning of this chapter, that you have to make big piles. Remember that? And only 3 in a base son. Everything we learned in Allah Allah base Gimel in this chapter. If you're digging out a cistern or trench or a storage cavity, and you're doing that's no problem. You're doing it to have a water reservoir. What do you do with that earth? So which is the way we are allowed to put zevel, and not in a way that it looks like you're being misakin your sadeh. To be continued.